But Chris, why is the integration of electric vehicles and solar and storage, I guess, such a game changer? How do you think that's going to affect things?
Yeah.
One of the keys to success in this business, of course, is building loyalty and helping your installers, your contractors, to be successful. Can you explain a little about SolarEdge's approach, or your opinion on what is the successful approach, not just to manufacture equipment, but to help your dealers and your installers be successful?
Some people don't want to sell storage because of that.
Exactly.
It's a real issue. The old expression, time is money.
All right, welcome to the SolarSurge podcast, broadcasting here from RE Plus 2023 on the Power Up Live stage, presented by KeyBank Capital Markets in partnership with Suncast Media. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting with Chris Thompson, Vice President of Product at SolarEdge, talking all about solar market trends in 2023, particularly convergence, as well as bidirectional EV charging and the mainstreaming of solar plus storage. So Chris, it's really good to see you again. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Of course, riding shotgun here is Dan Freshley, my partner here at SolarSurge University and the SolarSurge sales team. Dan, really excited to do this broadcast with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So Chris, the thing that I keep seeing here, and this is like a recurring trend, and we talk about it in a number of the videos that we've been producing this week, is we're seeing this go from, best of breed individual solar products and components to really the inverter company becoming like a solar platform or a solar operating system that provides almost all of your energy related needs, whether it's solar, storage, monitoring, load control. Can you tell us a little bit from your perspective, representing the market leading inverter manufacturer here, how have you seen the evolution go from where we were, say, maybe 5 years ago to where we are today?
Yeah, I think that assessment really nails it, and I think this year we're really seeing that kind of come really fully in terms of the solutions that we're seeing. Even our own company with SolarEdge, we evolved from a company that did solar inverters, and then you start adding batteries, and now you're seeing EV charging, and you're seeing load control. And I think, you and I talked about it a little bit more and more, we're seeing really the software layer is what integrates this all together. So in the past, I think you had solutions and you were focused on like the generation of solar, and then we're seeing really this year with NEM 3, this evolution of storage being a backup solution to being a financial solution. And we've seen this very interestingly, we've seen this in Europe and other regions. I often say we're kind of blessed there a little bit with our energy prices. If you think about Europe, not only just for electricity, but also for fossil fuels in general. And so the solutions that we're bringing here and at the show this year, more than in the past, are things that we've seen in other regions. And it's really about the entirety of the energy management. And solar, we're a solar inverter company, that's very important and kind of central to it. But it's really not just managing power being generated, but where and when how it's used. And with that NEM 3, it really forced it because the price signaling is so strong with NEM 3. You really have incentives to control how you use your energy. And so it's been a big step forward, and I think that was a singular step change in the industry, forcing these new solutions and making them financially more sensible.
Yeah, I know that was something we talked a little bit about yesterday, and we spoke in a previous video on as well, but how battery has really gone from this backup emergency used in coastal regions, whatever it may be, to really being an economic consideration. The way that you might store energy in the battery, deplete the battery during peak times, where you're getting the greatest value, sending it back to the grid. So it's pretty fascinating that we're starting to see that shift, and that how the economics play into that in consideration. Because typically, years past, at least I know, Joe, for you and I, it had oftentimes been, look, there isn't an ROI on battery. You're investing in peace of mind, and what is that worth? Well, you put the price tag on it.
The economics of backup is really hard. So before I got into solar, I worked in data centers and backup markets. And these were big markets, but actually doing an economic analysis was incredibly different. We often said it's more of an emotional sale.
Yes.
Right? And you see when people purchase backup solutions, they're highly correlated with natural disasters. So it's like before, during, or after. And it's really interesting, the psychology of an emotional purchase, because the memory is short. So you could be, in Texas. I grew up in New England. We had lots of hurricanes, and you at the moment it's very vivid, like living without power. But you know what? Like 4 months later, it's
It's not that bad.
it's really hard to make those purchases. But now you're right. It's in economics and solar. I would say it's very deterministic. An installer can go in, they can look at your bill, they know your irradiance. There's very good modeling tools, and the interest rate. They can give you the economics like to the decimal point.
Yeah.
Backup was just not like that at all.
Yeah. I think to that same point, I recall us talking about this a little bit yesterday. So SolarEdge has got some tools and some resources that are either in development or already currently there, maybe stemming from business in Europe and other places. How is SolarEdge utilizing, the tools and resources that are there to help determine some of the economics when it comes to batteries and how to use them, things of that sort?
So a great question, and kind of tying that to NEM3. So the solution that we used to see in Europe is kind of what we talked about with backup. So most homes that you've got, for our product we call it a backup interface, but it's really the disconnect switch that isolates you from the grid. Mm-hmm. So in Europe, people would install grid-tied storage, which is more like what you see at utility scale. There's actually no disconnect from the grid, and they wouldn't put that in. It's actually a lower cost solution, and so it goes in a little bit more quickly. So you save money on equipment, but time, installation, and inspection, and other things. And we said, okay, so we bring that over. So our product is branded the Rate Saver solution. So we have that. But in the U.S., people were like, oh, I didn't even know like you can do a battery without a disconnect switch. Like people actually challenged, like, are you sure you can do that?
Yeah.
And so the hardware changed, but then the algorithms now we'll run a cloud algorithm. We will predict what we think your home's going to generate, because we actually have a digital twin of the system in the cloud. So we know every module, the orientation, we know the irradiance data for the next day. So every night it creates a model, it predicts the generation curve. It knows your consumption, so it'll predict your consumption curve, and then it knows all the utility tariffs, and it will do like a dispatch model, and it's really economic. So it'll look at the economics of how to do it. Whereas before it used to be like maximizing self-consumption, which is an approach. But with these price signals, now you go by the economics, not necessarily by maximizing self-consumption.
Very cool.
Yeah, for me, as a guy who's been a solar and battery guy for now, 12 years or so, right? As Dan was saying earlier, when we first started doing these solar and storage systems, it was very much for a worst case scenario, peace of mind protection. But now we're at a point where there is a financial case to be made for doing solar with battery storage. And frankly, Dan, we were talking about this yesterday. The financial case for doing solar plus storage, even under NEM3, is still more advantageous than what you and I had to deal with on the East Coast, where we were just doing one-for-one bill swaps with net metering. So Chris, for those that are out there watching this, particularly for those that are maybe in the solar sales profession, they might be feeling a little bit down right now because there's NEM3 and it's not the good old days with the 0.99 interest rate loans and all that. But can you break down a little bit for just the basic value proposition for doing solar plus storage now, how that can still be profitable for a homeowner? Yeah,
so a couple things would come to my mind. The first thing that I think of is it's very location specific. So you mentioned New England, when I grew up in New England, and they tend to have pretty high electricity rates in New England, generally speaking. But the irradiance isn't maybe what it quite is. And of course, you've got specific regions like Hawaii. So it's very locationally specific. California, with NEM3, there's very strong price signaling, but we are seeing more states going to time of use rates. So anytime you have a time of use rate, you often have some type of, whether it's an arbitrage opportunity or just load shifting. And I would say, you've got a battery, but you've also got load shifting capabilities. So now we have load control. So it could be something where, you have a battery, but you're going to say, well, I'm going to turn off a pool pump. You could pick loads in your home, and you just shift when you run them. Maybe a load doesn't need to run all the time, and you could run it during a specific time. So you can look at batteries, you can look at storage to complement load control, looking at time of use markets. And I still think there'll be some markets where it may not make sense economically to do batteries. The other thing that's really growing is virtual power plants. And so we are seeing those programs growing. So I work for my home in Utah. Rocky Mountain Power has a great program. And now an installer can go in and they have the economics of that program with Rocky Mountain Power. And they do the application with Rocky Mountain Power for them. And so a homeowner gets about a $3,000 incentive, which is pretty attractive. And so I would say, look at time of use markets, look at load control to complement it, look at virtual power plant programs. We just enrolled in the Excel program in Colorado. But again, those are also location specific. Some regions have them. California has an upcoming program called DSGS, which will be very interesting. And what's interesting, I think, for that one is it can be additive to an existing customer who's on like NEM 2. So one thing that's interesting about the current program is you can go add a battery to it. And so we love that if you're a SolarEdge customer, we have a DC coupled battery. If you've already got that inverter, you can go put in a battery, and then you could participate in the DSGS program, which is kind of just coming out in the next couple of weeks. And so there's also that opportunity to go back and maybe to sell batteries to existing solar customers, because that virtual power plant program will be coming into a region. So it helps you sell a battery up front, but it also helps you go back to existing customers and especially customers you've got an existing relationship with, and add to the value.
Yeah, it's great. I know one of the common selling points when I'm designing or sort of consulting with a homeowner on projects, a lot of the areas that we sell, and especially East Coast, I mean, I live in Virginia, where energy rates probably average between about 13 to 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Pretty much one-to-one net metering everywhere, very minimal time of use. So the battery economic conversation is pretty irrelevant. It goes back to preparedness, mindset, that type of stuff. But the conversation that is often had, at least locally back home, is, well, hey, you can add, expand, and wanting to have the ability to bring in, hey, I have a SolarEdge inverter, how can I add a battery possibly in the future? Maybe incorporate bidirectional charging, whatever those things are. So I think that kind of goes back to the original statement, and what we've seen as a common theme here is sort of the ecosystem platform that manufacturers are pushing towards, which in certain markets might also give you the ability to, hey, start here and expand and grow over time as is needed. Could be with additional PV. Yep. I know NEM 2 and 3, there's some stipulations in that in California, but in other places could be additional PV, could be battery, bidirectional charging,
and it could be EV. So another interesting thing, you see the electric bill change when they get an EV. So you have a customer, you sold them a system, and maybe it was perfectly sized 3 years ago. They went and got an EV. Like a rough rule of thumb, your electric bill doubles. Obviously, it depends on your commute. Yeah. But electric bill will double. You may say, "Oh, I'm going to sell you an EV charger. I'm going to sell you additional, PV to support that bill." And the nice part is with these platforms, we've got a mode, in the app that's very people really like right now. It's charge your vehicle with excess solar. So if you ever have a time of the day where it's sunny and you're not using everything locally, and increasingly we're seeing putting the energy back on the grid, you may not get paid a lot for it. So the energy management system, because it's integrated, will say, okay, well, I'll put that extra energy into the vehicle, and really look at how you use every electron that's generated, use that in the home, and use it in the most valuable way. But I think EVs are really interesting, go back to sell to somebody, and add solar, maybe add storage, maybe add an EV charger.
Well, let's talk more about that, because that's another sort of hot topic in the industry here this year, is the advent of bidirectional EV charging. And kind of the overlap of the electric vehicle and the home renewable energy system really is all part of one home system, right? Because if you think about it, Dan, you have a Tesla electric vehicle, right? And so your electric vehicle is almost like a battery on wheels, right? And sometimes that battery is plugged into your home system, sometimes it's on the road. But Chris, why is the integration of electric vehicles and solar and storage I guess such a game changer? How do you think that's going to affect things going forward?
So I'll have to contain myself a little bit, because it's a very fun topic to talk about. But for me, like the engineer in me, I see a vehicle and I recognize it's also for transportation. But to me, it's like a mobile battery pack, right? Sure. So when you look at it as a mobile battery pack, you think about how you can use that. And I actually had a gentleman, a utility engineer, in our booth just a little while ago, and we were kind of talking about this, because as a load, it can be intimidating, because you think about how much energy they can draw. But the saving grace on the vehicle is you have a lot of flexibility on when you charge it, right? So he was saying, oh yeah, we can have a rate at like 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., and it's very easy to schedule that. So yes, it does need a lot of energy, but you have a lot of flexibility on where and when you charge it. And we've gone to our existing charging solutions and pull up the data. And it's very interesting to see how much energy they're actually using. It's not very much. Because the model with an EV that I didn't realize at the time was, it's not like a car where you let it go to zero and then you fill it up. It never goes to zero. It's like, oh, I go to work, I charge it, I go home, I charge it. And the vehicles are like bouncing around between like 90 and 100% state of charge. So you have that flexibility. But the other side that I think we're really in the beginning stages of, and we announced at the show, so we have a bidirectional charger. But what that will enable is now for vehicles in the future to participate as a grid asset. So you can control when you charge it, but then you can dispatch it. And I think I'm realistic about it. I don't think car companies are going to jump into this right away. You get a Tesla, maybe you get a 70 kilowatt hour battery. Oh, I'm going to drain all my battery and make $5. I think they're going to be very cautious. Like, I'll let you use 5% of it. I'll let you use 10% of it. And then when they understand how it impacts the entirety of the life, so they'll create like a safe boundary conditions. But when you look at the batteries in the vehicles, they're getting better. People are using terms like the million-mile battery, right? And so if you have vehicle batteries that are going to go hundreds of thousands of miles, then they'll start letting you say, okay, use it. And I think and that's when the manifestation of it really being a mobile battery pack, like very valuable to the grid. And I think that's really going to be interesting. But I think it'll take years for that to slowly unfold and get that comfort level.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about that yesterday as well, where I think, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but the Ford F-150 Lightning has that capability today. It's a 120 or 50 kilowatt hour battery, but there are limitations on what Ford has said you can use within that battery. So just because you own a Model S Tesla 100 kilowatt hour battery doesn't mean you have 100 kilowatt hours to use. It'll be interesting to see what the auto manufacturers allow and the adverse effects of the cycling and how frequently those are happening and what that does maybe to longevity of the vehicle battery. But like you said, the million-mile battery is kind of the target or what's been talked about. And I can't help but laugh earlier when you made a comment about how you're not typically, you're not discharging to zero. I remember I had a lot of friends when I first got my Tesla that said, oh, how long does it take to charge? I'm like, well, 5 seconds. I just plug the cable in, and just let it go. Because most of the time, it's an act I'm doing as I walk into the house.
It's passive, it's not active, where you're standing at the pump, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Well, you touched on another issue here, too, which is that, in order for this to really work to its full potential, we need buy-in from the auto manufacturers as well, right? We as the solar industry can't sort of force it. We need to agree on standards, and that's probably one of the questions that I get when we talk about this bidirectional EV charging is, well, which standard are you going to support? Are the auto manufacturers going to keep up? So Chris, what's your opinion as far as, what role do standards play? Why are standards important in making the most out of this technology?
Yeah, so standards are like absolutely the foundation and are very central. Because you expect when you have a vehicle and you have a charger, you expect those to work with each other. And so, I would say like the charging standard is good, right? You have a vehicle, you can go to a charge station, you can charge your vehicle. So it can be a diversity of vendors of the charger, and it can be a diversity of vehicles, and that works very well, I would say. Now, on bidirectionality, it's not quite there. There is a standard that we commonly talk about. It's ISO 15118-20. There was a new version of it that came out, I think it was May of last year, and it substantially defined kind of the interaction for bidirectionality. And so, all these chargers, before they transmit any power, they handshake, right? So they connect to each other, and the vehicle, the voltage of the vehicle changes with state of charge. So we say, like, oh, it's a 400-volt battery pack. That's a general voltage, but it changes with state of charge. So the standard for bidirectionality is not, I would say, 100% complete. And so often, I think, and we've seen this in earlier stages in the solar industry, the standards tend to go on a multi-year cycle. Technology can change a lot from year to year. So I think we're at a period right now where there's a little bit of catch-up happening on the standards. So I think I would say we're close, but we're not quite there. And so that's why I would say it's a pretty big barrier to widespread adoption. But I think we're within a couple of years of at least the standards becoming more specific on the interface and the communication.
Yeah, I think that standard also applies to. And we talked a little bit about this, and I think you alluded to this about the SolarEdge bidirectional charger, the actual charging port of it itself, standardization, right? Because it's hard to explain. I mean, if I was talking to my grandmother today, or even my mom and dad today, and said, hey, electric vehicle, a lot of times they might pull in thinking, okay, I'm used to just putting this thing in the tank, and there you go. But not having a standardized system today can make it quite difficult, especially if you're trying to talk about mass adoption. People just don't know how to use them. They don't know. Try telling somebody, yeah, there's a Tesla charger there, but you can't use that. You have to go to this one. It's just difficult. So standardizing, I think, becomes really beneficial.
And Tesla really made that. We saw, like, just in a matter of weeks, Tesla kind of basically, they renamed it the North American Charging Standard, which is interesting. So they just by name, they created their own standard. But then everyone fell in line, and you saw the press releases every day.
GM, Ford.
Everybody. So everybody fell in line. Technologically, it's a nice connector. The way they use the conductors, it is a good platform. But I think maybe that actually, in hindsight, looking at it, may actually help force the standard. To get everyone on a common standard, because we still run into it. You get a little bit of Chidemo, which is a little bit more Japanese in origin. So I think anything that forces those standards will help.
Excellent. Well, I know there's certainly a lot of consumer demand for us to solve this problem.
Yes.
Right? Because consumers, and I talk to them all the time, they're very excited about being able to use their electric vehicle sort of to its full potential as an integrated piece of the home renewable energy system. Chris, another question that comes to mind here, again, as we're talking about solar with storage now mainstreaming, seeing a number of new manufacturers pop up, dozens of them here, that are new battery, inverter, solar providers. But one of the keys to success in this business, of course, is building loyalty and helping your installers, your contractors, to be successful. Can you explain a little about SolarEdge's approach, or your opinion on what is the successful approach, not just to manufacture equipment, but to help your dealers and your installers be successful, so that they can do these projects that are now going to be more complex. Right? There's going to be more complexity. There's going to be more risk in these installations now. To help those contractors do those projects with the same amount of predictability and profitability that they're used to doing solar only.
Okay, so that is a great question. And at our booth, for the first time ever, we actually have it's like the installability corner, which we have never had. And actually, so within our company, there was a small division that was created a couple of years ago. And I kind of think of them as anthropologists. So when we go out and we work with our installers, you often want to help them. Right? Like, let me get that box for you, open. I know how to install it. You do some, it's kind of like a natural thing to do. But you have to restrain yourself and say, as an anthropologist, I want to watch the installer in their natural environment and see how they interact. So we kind of went through that period. So we have this installability section, and looked at everything from things that could be mundane, like how do you open the box and dispose of the cardboard? Where is the manual? Having built-in indications, like just how you label the terminal so you're clear whether it's positive or negative or battery or PV. A lot of it went into our installer app. So one cool feature that we just added to the installer app are these little nuggets of training videos. So say you haven't installed a battery in a while, and you're installing one, and you hopefully you're trained and you're certified, but you go in, and from the installer app, you can access like a 30-second video that will say here's how you do that connection, and they're very discrete little nuggets. So maybe you remembered most of it, but you forgot one little part. Is there communication or something like that? And so a lot of that, that intelligence went into the app, gives them access to training. From a hardware perspective, we've done a couple things. So we have gone almost entirely to wireless communications. One of the things that we saw in these installations, when people are hardwiring, like you see RS-45 or CAN bus, and these are protocols that have been around for a while, and not really meant for updating firmware package. These are old protocols for controls. You want to update the firmware, and your battery, it's not really suited for that. And someone would need to run a wire from an inverter to a battery, and they crimp the connector wrong. They install everything, it looks beautiful, and it's not communicating. And they are going nuts, spending hours to troubleshoot it. So from a reliability perspective, but also when you want to do your firmware update, you don't need to wait as long, and the aesthetics get a little bit better. So we've gone almost entirely. It's based on Google OpenThread, so it's a very robust and secure protocol. And then this year we also launched a unit, we call it the SolarEdge Connection Unit, and it's been nicknamed the Gutter. And it's because we saw people using gutters, and what we did is we pre-molded into the plastic the connections and all the parts. So once they put it on, the inverter, the backup interface drop right onto it. And doing that installation we have down to 18 minutes. We used to measure these things in hours. Now we're looking at how we can pull out individual minutes. And it's not technologically sophisticated at all. It's kind of a box, but it's got all the connections pre-molded into it, a little grounding bar, and you're in. And of course it's stained plastic, so color is very nice. So we really thought about it from the software side, from the installer side, and then from the hardware side.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I think to your point there, Joe, I mean, over the years, and we were in the business a long time of doing piecemealed batteries, charge controllers, this battery, pull that off the shelf. But the issue, again, from a business side, the economics of it was I just can't, I can't sell this project at a high enough price to cover all the costs and still be as profitable on a battery project as I could be on a regular grid tie 1 or 2 array roof surface.
Some people don't want to sell storage because of that.
Exactly.
It's a real issue. The old expression, time is money,
Very legitimate.
It really is here, and it's also risk, of maybe the installation not going flawlessly. And if you want it to be profitable, it needs to be a flawless first-time installation, in our opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, going back to 2017, we were one of the first guys selling solar plus storage on the East Coast. I mean, we were selling what at the time was the SolarEdge inverter with the LG Chem battery. And Chris, what you said is exactly true.
Oh, okay.
We had so many installations that failed simply because the communication between the battery and the inverter didn't work, or the inverter firmware got updated and now it's not compatible with the battery firmware, and all sorts of issues with that. When it absolutely kills you as a contractor, you got to send the technician back out. And usually it's not the junior technician. You're sending the senior guy out for the battery job, right? And so that kind of stuff really kills you. So the wireless communications, if it works, I think that's going to be a massive advantage there.
We've had to convince some people, it's been out for a year, and you see them they do hard wiring, and then they try it a couple times, and they slowly tiptoe, because I think people have had issues with Zigbee in the past, and they've got some memory and some scar tissue from those experiences, and so I think companies like Google help to solve that, but I know it takes some convincing for sure.
Yeah,
for good reason.
Well, there's been a lot of learnings. I mean, the reality of it is we're in a high technology type of industry. There's going to be some learnings along the way. We have some scars, we have some experiences, from those things. But the technology is maturing, and for me, it's especially exciting to see this because, as you said, back to the days when it was kind of a science experiment of piecing together different components and trying to put these systems together, to now see mainstream products that are all integrated, that aesthetically look a lot nicer. They look like a modern home appliances. They don't look like a science experiment to put in your basement somewhere. So it's really cool to see all that come together. Well, folks, I know we're kind of down to the last few minutes here. Dan, is there anything else that you'd like to cover here while we're on the Power Up Live podcast?
Oh, man. No, nothing specifically. I mean, it's been a great week overall, seeing innovations, new technologies. Again, common theme seems to be this, every manufacturer trying to consolidate to this one system, one language, not having to translate English to Spanish and back and forth, and just really say, hey, if it's SolarEdge, optimizers, inverter, battery, EV charger, bidirectional, et cetera. And I think it's really cool because I think from the business side and from a salesperson side, that is you're easily able to articulate that to a homeowner and explain why there's advantages to just kind of keeping it all in one platform. Now, if you're more the do-it-yourself type, the tinkerer stuff, maybe you're looking for other alternatives. But there's plenty of different products in the market that you can bring those things together. So I think what SolarEdge has now, we've seen this from other manufacturers too, allows you to really invest in the platform as kind of being that primary product, and then from that subset of other items that SolarEdge or whomever manufacture.
And to add to that, I think we've seen this with Tesla, vehicles. They roll out new software and it adds new features to an existing vehicle. I think we're at the point where we will be seeing that in solar.
Kind of as a service type of, or
not necessarily as a service, but you can add new functionality to an existing system by updating the firmware. So we added, if you have a battery, we have a storm watch mode. So now it looks at the weather in your region. If it sees a storm's coming, you'll get an alert that says, hey, your battery's in a VPP program. Do you want it to get the battery fully charged because the storm's coming tomorrow? No hardware change, but it added some value to the homeowner. So I think we'll see new features come out. You have a rate case change in your territory, it could automatically update to re-optimize and configure for that. So we'll have new features that are 100% software enabled and not requiring hardware to enable those new features.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think the other part of that too, obviously, is just having the ability to, when you invest in a solar system, if you're not the high-tech understanding person, you just want to know that it works and that it functions how you need it to. You don't have to tinker with things. Storm watch, hey, if I have bad hurricanes coming, storms coming, I want to make sure I've got power.
Absolutely.
Every other time I want to prioritize my economic benefits. So
Amy Shervin said what you want, hot showers and cold beer. Right, so the complexity, put that behind them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, this has been a special edition of the Power Up Live and Solar Surge podcast here at RE Plus in Las Vegas. Again, we've been joined by Chris Thompson this morning, Vice President of Product at SolarEdge. Thanks so much for your time, Chris.
Thanks, Joe.
And appreciate everything you're doing with us. Folks, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.